monster who hurt those kids is dead. That monster is dead. And we told you from the beginning. And it is one of the worst things that ever happened. And I told you, the first time I stood up here and talked to you, I told you that you were not going to be the same person when you come out of this. And nor should you be. Nor should any of us. Witnessing horror, the tragedy, the loss, it's immeasurable. It's immeasurable. It's unthinkable. That loss is unthinkable. Their loss, it's unthinkable for any of us. You know, I told you guys that I have a 4-year-old and 1-year-old. And, you know, we told you we're from San Antonio. And obviously, you know, I want to go back and see him on the weekends after the first week. I went back. The first thing I did was my 4-year-old came downstairs and I hugged him. Right? And hugged him. And started crying. And his hair, you know, trying to, so he doesn't see it. He said, "Are you sad, Daddy?" I said, "No, I'm happy that I'm holding you." Because I know what a privilege, doing this case, I know what a privilege it is to hold that child. I do. Right? I know, I can just imagine what it's like to not be able to do that. And I can imagine the pain, and I can imagine the anger. I can imagine wanting to put somebody in that chair because I can't put the monster that did that to my child in that chair. I can imagine. And I can imagine putting pressure. And I can imagine them responding to the pressure. And I can imagine them putting him in that chair. Him and only him. In that chair. To try to pay for the pain. To try to somehow this could cover the immeasurable and the immense loss. And so after I saw him on Friday, we have to come back here that Sunday after the first week. And Gary, he comes and picks me up. That's kind of what we've been doing. And my son comes out and he says, "Are you going to go help that man?" That's what we told him was the reason I'm not there. I said, "Yeah, I'm going to go help that man." Adrian Gonzales. Because he needs my help. He needs our help. Because they, the government, the power of the state, has decided that he has to pay for the failures of that day, for the mistakes that were made that day, and for all the pain that they feel. And it's not right. Because the person that they plucked out and put in that chair, that person showed, we showed throughout this trial, that person was acting. He was acting. He was trying. And what I hear from the prosecutor, what I hear from the state, and what you've heard this entire time, what you've heard is that they will massage all the facts, they'll twist them all into a pretzel. That every one of these officers is fine, he's not. They'll twist it. Well, look who acted. They acted. Well, Adrian acted. Well, he didn't act the right way. They acted. Well, they didn't act the right way. Well, yeah, but he didn't act the right way, and he didn't know exactly what was going on, and he remained. Well, yeah, but Adrian remained in the hallway. Adrian remained in the hallway after he got shot at. Well, yeah, he remained in danger at that point, but before that point he remained, and he didn't know what was going on. Every fact that they've tried to bring, they've twisted it around. I'm going to show you. You're going to watch. I'm going to show you what they've done to twist this thing from the beginning to the end. But ultimately, what we're talking about is we're talking about duty, we're talking about burden, and all of those things. And I don't want one thing that I'm saying right now to make you believe that he doesn't believe that he has a duty to stop something that he knows is going on. Of course he does. He knows that. He was trying to do it. He started trying to do his duty. You look at some of these other people, no. They're not trying to do their duty. They're trying to stay back. And one of the things that the prosecutor said, he said, what you do here will tell law enforcement, give them how they respond. I'll tell you what, I agree with that, but not in the way that he's saying it. Because the way he wants you to believe it is what your verdict says is that next time these officers will make the right choice, the right decision. They will respond appropriately. They will be perfect. But the problem is that the issues here are not that Adrian failed to respond. They're not that he was intending not to engage. So you're not going to fix any of that. Because I'll tell you, and I hope it never happens again. I think we all know that it probably will. But those officers, what your verdict says is not going to make them perfect the next time. It's not going to make them not make mistakes. It's not going to make them not interpret things differently, strangely, weirdly, based on their own experiences. That's not what it's going to do. But I'll tell you what it would do. If you convict them, they're all going to be Randy Hill on that perimeter. There's nobody going in. What did he do? He went in. And you convict him, what does it tell all the police officers? It's going to tell them, I'm not getting in that crap. I'm not getting in that chair. If I see somebody running towards the school, I'm not going after them, because if I'm mistaken and it takes me to the other side of the building from where the shooter is, and then I can't understand or know where the shooter is, I can go to prison. I can get prosecuted. So what you tell police officers is don't go in, don't react, don't respond, stay on the perimeter, because Randy Hill isn't sitting in that chair. He's not. Adrian Gonzales is here. Randy Hill is not. None of those officers are in that chair. That's what you're going to tell them. You're going to tell them don't do it. And you can't tell them that. It's like, I agree with them. You can't tell them that. We cannot have law enforcement feel that way. Feel like if they're not perfect, if they don't make a perfect decision. And that's where they go. And their family goes right there. There's nothing that's going to bring these kids back. There's nothing ever is going to solve that pain. Nothing. Not that. Because one of the things that Bill said to you is he said, those kids deserve to be remembered, and they do. But you do not honor their memory by doing an injustice in their name. You don't. That does not honor those children. By doing an injustice, by doing what they want you to do, by letting him massage the facts, by letting the pretzel go all the way around and miss everybody else, but keeps going right back to him, because that's what they need. We talk about the charge. If I can get it up. The duty. So remember this about what the court has read to you. And remember, I'm not saying he doesn't have a duty. Of course he does. But just like every officer, just like the officers in San Antonio, they all had the duty. But that's, and it may have sounded flippant when we compared it. We said, look, you're in San Antonio. You hear there's a school shooting, right? You didn't stop it. Well, no, because it's not happening in the presence. And the reason we're asking that question is because the law is specific about it. A person, they have a duty to prevent an offense against a person about to be committed in his presence. So the first thing you have to figure out is that in his presence? You know, and the judge told you, you know, use common meanings, but he is here, and he never, they're not even disputing, he never saw the shooter, ever. He is never in the presence of the shooter. Now what Bill may say is, well, he didn't go to the presence. But that's not what this law says. Law doesn't say you have to go and find yourself and make yourself be in the presence, and I'm not trying to make any excuse about that. But the law is the law is the law. This isn't about you have to go seek it out and make it happen in your presence. The law is saying if it's happening right there, there's a duty. Of course there is. He was doing his duty. He was running to the danger. He was driving right in there. If that was the gunman, and God, I wish it was, he would have ran right over him. That's what he was doing. He's going 50 miles an hour at that person. Now, what I'm glad is he didn't run the person over because he realized it's Melody Flores. He realized it's a coach is what he thought, teacher's aide. But he realized who it was after it's already too late, but he's here. And from this point, that shooter is never in his presence, ever. There's never a time. The only time that he gets close is when he goes, one of the first 5 people to go up that hallway. That is a hallway of death. Anyone going into that hallway knows, anyone knows, any police officer knows, that those rifle rounds start coming that way as they're coming up the hallway. It's death. They don't have any equipment. They don't have anything to block it. It's death. He went in that hallway of death. See, and I thought about it because there's no way I can tell you about how they feel, but I thought about it as a parent. As a parent with kids there, if I knew that while my kid was in that classroom, somebody was going up that hallway, risking death to try to get to him, I'd appreciate it. I would. I mean, they're not perfect, but the person who did it, the monster, is dead. But he went up. A lot of people there didn't. A lot of people didn't enter that building until it was the room was surrounded on all sides by officers with rifles. Not one person on the side that he went in had one. Not one person had an AR. Not one person had a rifle. And they went in. Donald Page went in. Coronado went in. Chief Arredondo went in. Those people all went in and risked certain death. And the only time that he could have even been close to being in the presence of the shooter is when the shooter shot at him and Page through the wall. And you heard that testimony that there's gunshots going through the wall that they have to back up because not only can they not get to the door at all, they cannot get to the door. Joe Vasquez told you, that door, you're going to die at the door. You will die at the door. And I know that what the prosecution's saying is you should. Your job is to die at the door. But there was a lot of people out there. And if that's the training, die at the door, then everybody out there didn't follow it. Everybody out there waited until there was shield. Everybody out there, Joe Vasquez included. Everybody. And you remember what Joe said. He said, thought his daughter could be in there, and he still waits 50 minutes for shields, for a plan, for BORTAC. So that's what I'm saying. They're twisting it around, and they're saying, well, his job, every shot was noticed that Adrian had to go in and be the person to die at the door, to be the person that tried to breach, solo entry with nothing. But nobody else did that. So is that the training? Right? Like that's one of the things that you have the right to go, because that's count 2, disregarding his training. Is that the training? Because if that is the training, and all these officers have been trained, and not one of them does it, but only one of them sits there, right? Like you have to twist it. Every time, for every fact, has to be twisted around. That no other officer, I'm assuming, they made a point. Everybody's trained an active shooter. But that's why we pointed out that, well, now it's become a barricaded subject. And that training's different than active shooter. Now, some people are treating it like a hostage situation. And that's different than active shooter. And so the point is with this training was never meant to be twisted and used like this. You think that anybody that's put it on police training is going, yeah, and if you don't follow this, you're going to prison? That's not what they're doing. They're trying to give the best possible tactics and strategies to get to the best possible outcome. That's the point. But go back to the duty. If you find right there, honestly, he was never in the shooter's presence. Never was in his presence. Because that law, do not let them argue that law means that he has to go put himself in the presence. That law says it has to be in his presence. That's what that says. And if that's there, and you say that wasn't in his presence, then it doesn't apply. Under 605, he has a duty to prevent the threat to do injury if within his power. So they have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that it's within his power. Because what they're not talking about is, no, this is saying you have the duty to go and follow the gunfire. That's not what this says. It doesn't say you have a duty to follow the gunfire. What it says is if it's within his power. So all of the officers before the breach, all the officers that even, and I don't have anything bad to say about Joe Vasquez. That man went in there. He went in there and he was willing to put his life on the line. But going in there like that in that room, it's not a whole lot different than going up that hallway, the first people to go up there, without any protection, without any rifle-rated anything, without any fire, without any rifles, without anything. But what that's telling you is that the reason that they waited is because it was within none of their power to get in that room. It was within none of their power to do that. It was not within his power to get in there and stop it, and it was not within any of those other guys until they got the right equipment. And then they went in, and it was within their power. But if they haven't proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Adrian could have done something to prevent, if beyond a reasonable doubt, then that doesn't apply. And then, of course, the education code just says he protects the safety and welfare of people in his jurisdiction. Well, of course. But that's not a duty. I don't even understand why it's there. It's not a duty to say, well, yes, and if you violate it, you go to prison. If you violate it, you're a convicted felon. If you violate it, you're going to be on trial. That's just telling police officers, and especially those who work at schools, that your duty is to do that. Of course it is. That's your job. Of course it is. But what we're talking about is we're talking about a man who is trying to do that. He is not trying to do that. He's not going, I'm not protecting anybody. Uh-oh, shooter. And then drive off the other way. He doesn't drive around the building. He doesn't drive away from the gunfire. He's still trying to figure this out, because we're talking about 1 minute and 48 seconds under their indictment. He keeps saying 3 minutes, but it's 1 minute and 48 seconds. I showed you this in voir dire. When we talk about beyond a reasonable doubt, possibly, probably, guilt likely, strong belief. If you have a strong belief that he had a duty, it's not guilty. Right there. That's why I'm talking about duty first, because as the prosecutor explained, if there's not a duty, then there's not. And not one of this is to be interpreted as me saying that he doesn't have a duty. We all have a duty to each other. And he's a police officer, and he's going to do what he can. But when we're talking about criminal charges, if you even get to, well, it's likely that he does have that duty. It's likely that it was within his power. It's likely that it was within his presence. I have a strong belief it was in his presence. I have a strong belief that it was within his power. That's not guilty. It's a verdict of not guilty right there. That's the first consideration. But going to the indictment, after hearing gunshots and after being advised of the general location of the shooter, and Nico's going to talk to you a lot more about this, it's convenient the way they're twisting it. It's convenient the way they're saying, well, of course, he was advised. She told him, 1, 2, 3, and told him exactly where it was, and she pointed over, she's over here, pointed over there, and he knew. That's how they're presenting it to you. But that's not how we know that that's not how it happened. We know, we have to know, because she is frantic. She is very unclear about a lot of things. And so if you have a reasonable doubt that he was advised of the general location of the shooter, that's not guilty. If you have a reasonable doubt that he had time to respond to the shooter, quick or slow on the uptake. Right, having time to respond to the shooter. If you have a reasonable doubt as to that, it's not guilty. Right, because what we established, even now when he's reading Adrian's statement, shots fired, or she told me where it was, shots fired, I radioed it out. He's compressing time in his interview, and we're going to talk about that. He's compressing that time. The way he's telling it, she tells him, da-da-da, and then he communicates it on the radio. We know that that's not what happened. We know that from the time of shots fired to the time he communicates it on the radio is a longer period of time, which is accounted for by the fact that he is trying to get the information out of her. Once he does, he communicates it. Once he communicates it, we told you, it's a second after this monster's already gotten in. That unlocked door, but it's already gotten in that door. When he communicates this out, the guy's already there. So having time to respond. Once he finally figures out what it is, does he have time to respond? And if he does respond, we were showing you, if he does respond over here, he's responding to something that's not even there anymore. He's doing basically what Coronado does, which is go completely away from where they saw him go in and go all the way around the building. So if there's a reasonable doubt as to having time to respond, that's not guilty. Any reasonable doubt as to any of these things, these are all elements that they have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt. And if there's any reasonable doubt as to any of these things, if there's a reasonable doubt as to Melody Flores and what she said, that doesn't say anything about her. That woman was traumatized. Of course she's going to be confused. Of course she's going to say it's a handgun when it's a rifle. Of course she's going to describe a completely different police car. Of course she's going to do those things because she's traumatized. But the reason we point those things out is they want him to be perfect, but they have to be perfect. They have to convince you perfectly, almost, beyond a reasonable doubt of their evidence. And that evidence rests on what did Melody Flores say and when did she say it? And they did not prove that. They did not prove it because even when she testified, and Nico's going to go over it, she agreed that she was not just saying clearly, hi, this is what's happening, and this is where it is. She was saying a lot of different things. and it goes back to that chart. Anywhere you are, if you're suspected, if he's possibly guilty, if he's probably guilty, I told you voir dire, I mean, you know, most people get convicted at that probably. Because jurors go, well, he's probably guilty, so they convict him. But that's not what the standard is. That's not what the law says. The law says it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the only way that our Constitution works. It's the only way our system of justice works. Now let's talk about this. Let's talk about Ranger Hill. Look at this. I froze it on his animation that he did. Right at the point that Adrian's passing that spot. And that's where he has the shooter. He says it's approximate. Well, guess what? Approximate's not beyond a reasonable doubt. Their whole case is based on approximate guesses, speculation. We don't know. We're just really mad and we're upset that we have to put somebody here. Somebody's got to go in that chair. Because the guy who actually did this thing, the monster who did this, cannot go in that chair. He's dead. And good riddance. Good riddance. The devastation and the destruction he caused is unlike almost anything that has happened to us as a country, as a people, and definitely in the state of Texas. The devastation that he caused. Children that young and that many. Good riddance. But that's not him. But they have to have somebody. So what do? They give you an animation that looks like that. Which, as we know, we had to bring a witness. We had to bring Claudia to tell you and to show you. Look, you'll see him. He's walking right there. And you see him walking in between those cars, and he stays there. Now, in a few seconds, you're going to see Adrian's car drive by. His head kind of popped down when it happens. He's going right there. You see the white car is flashing right through. That's Adrian driving by him between the cars. So what would an honest rendition of what you just saw, what Claudia testified, what does an honest rendition of that look like? It looks like that. That's what that animation should have looked like. Because we have actual proof. And Ranger Hill can't act like he didn't know that existed. He told you about the puff of smoke. That's the same video he's looking at. He knows that this guy's between the cars. But he told y'all, they sponsored it, that he was here. Why are they doing that? Because they're willing to twist things. They're willing to twist things for you guys in order for you to do their bidding. But those kids aren't honored by an injustice in their name. They're not. It's not honored by a conviction in their name.
And traced the window going down into the 111. Melanie Flores is still urging Adrian Gonzales to go in. She sees the shot come through the window. Adrian Gonzales tells the police that she's the shot go through the window. Adrian Gonzales gets on the radio and says, guys, I think he's made it in the building.
See, that's what they told you at the beginning. They told you that Adrian Gonzales got on the radio and said, guys, I think he's made it in the building. Why are they telling you that? Because they want you to believe that he had that knowledge early, that he knew that he was in the building. What else did he say? In the opening statement to you, that Melody Flores saw the gunshot go through the window. When she testified, she said, I didn't see that. Why is it important? It's because Coronado radioed. Coronado, we've talked about it. And I feel like it keeps going into a memory hole every time it goes back over here. Right here, Coronado says, guys, I think he made it in the building. He established that. He said, he's the guy on the radio. He's the guy that thinks. Even Ranger Hill said, Coronado is the one who said that. Why did he say that? Because these three saw him do it. Because these three had line of sight. And he's radioing that around. And one thing we were clear to point out is that a gunshot did go off at the exact same time as that transmission. Why is that important? Because we don't know who heard that or who didn't. We don't know who heard Coronado go out and say that he's in the building. But we know that Coronado knew that or said that. And so that's the knowledge he has when he's driving around. Why is that important? Because prosecution, what have they tried to make you think? Coronado knew immediately that the gunshot fire was coming from the building. Coronado knew immediately that. Look at Coronado. He knew it immediately. Of course he did. He saw him move the building on the side. He knew it from here. Once he came around
I
here.
object to that. That's not admitted into evidence. There's no evidence that Coronado saw the shooter. There's no testimony of that or anything like that. So now he's misstating facts to the jury.
Okay, once again, ladies and gentlemen, what the lawyers say is not evidence. If the evidence, based upon your recollection, differs, rely on your own. You may proceed.
Well, and I can understand why they're trying to fight against that, because look, this is, what I'm saying is we know that he radioed. I think he's in the building. When he's on this side of the building going to the other side, we know why. He testified. I thought he was going through the building, which implies that he knows that he went in to the building. But they keep fighting against that because this, knowing that he's gone into the building on this side, all their training, what does it say? Go to the gunfire. Even Ranger Hill they're twisting everything. They're twisting it all around. Ranger Hill said, well, yes, going to the gunfire is going all the way around here to the other side of the building, from where you saw him enter and from where you heard and saw him shooting into the building. So that to them is going to the gunfire. That to them is following their training, exactly how they're supposed to. That to them is working to distract, delay, all the things they've charged him with. Well, they're not charged because they did that, even though they watched this happen. Had to have. And then Mike Whitskill. Now, I thought this was interesting. Mike Whitskill, I mean, he's an interesting guy. He said, I'm here as an expert witness in training, right? He didn't have any opinion. This is the interesting thing. The state had every opportunity to have Mike Whitskill go, I trained this guy. And I've seen all this stuff that you've given. And I reviewed all of these things. And Adrian Gonzales did not follow the training that I had. They had every opportunity to do that, and they didn't. They didn't ask him. He said, I didn't review anything. I don't have any opinion about whether or not Adrian Gonzales followed his training. In fact, you don't have any opinion at all. You don't have any real statement from anybody about whether or not he followed his training. And the things that you have from the officers are always with a caveat. Yes, you run to the gunfire if you know where it's coming from. If you don't know where it's coming from, you take cover and assess until you know where it is coming from. That's the first thing. You run towards the gunfire if you know where it's coming from. You look at their active shooter trainings. All the active shooter trainings involve them seeing the shooter and then going after the shooter, which makes sense. But they are prosecuting a person that they will have to admit, and they have admitted, and they've stipulated and never contested that Adrian never saw the shooter. I mean, he talked about the death by PowerPoint. In Adrian's 40-hour class that they were talking about, the 40-hour class he took, he said, look, we do 75-25, the practical versus the death by PowerPoint. I'll point out that, and you'll see that in the training that the prosecution mentioned about, well, Adrian taught a training. He facilitated a training. He did. There was somebody else who wrote the materials. There was somebody else who did it. And that's really what they kind of do. They have to facilitate for each other so that they can get their training hours. But in these trainings that are happening, in the trainings that are going on, all of the trainings are training them to come in, have a rifle, come in, go in and be prepared to come in and do those things, and mainly to come in and see the shooter. Mainly to come in and know where the shots and the shooter is happening. And what they have done is they have just said, well, we don't care. Yeah, he said he didn't know where the shooter was. We don't believe him. We believe everybody else. Everybody else gets a pass. Everybody else. Randy Hill gets a pass. Saucedo gets a pass. Well, yeah. Saucedo said, I think I see him, permission to shoot. Well, we don't believe he said that. Or if he did say that, he had kids behind him, so he shouldn't shoot. That's crazy. That's crazy. Talking about this backdrop, that's crazy. And if that's the case, these officers are being overtrained on backdrop, because you do not fail to shoot a mass murderer of children because there's a backdrop where you could potentially shoot a child. You don't do that. You have to take that shot. And so if that's what they're saying, well, no, Saucedo has a reason why, because there's this backdrop. But then we pointed out, well, if Adrian did what they were asking him to do and came around here, we know now that by the time he transmitted, the guy's in the school, so he would have come around and nobody would be there. Thank you. But even if he came around and somebody was there, shooting back here that's his backdrop too. But nope, not for him. No excuse we make for every other person there applies to him. And I think that there's something fundamental in each one of us. I think it's fundamental in each one of you that that's not fair. I think it's fundamental that that's not how justice is supposed to be done. It's not. It is not fair. It's not how justice is done, that they can do that and interpret every fact against him, but for everybody else, similarly situated or better situated. He agrees it takes 10,000 hours of practice to reach expertise. I mean, these are not experts. Adrian is not a SWAT expert. He is not an active shooter expert, right? He is doing the best he can, and this was obviously the worst situation of his or any of their law enforcement lives. 5 minutes to dress like one, 5 years to be one. I mean, the training is so extensive, and it's much, much more than Mike Whitskill gave 40 hours on that day. And then they talk about, well, you stop the killing, stop the dying. They never tell you how in these trainings. They never say how. They never say, how do you do it if it's just you and a gun and they have a rifle and you're in an open field? They don't say how. They just say do it. Go in, win the game. Now, this is what in his instructor course, CME does not endorse nor encourage going it alone. See, what I'm saying is that these are sending mixed messages to the people who are being trained. They're reading this. They're seeing it. And then when you're talking about beyond a reasonable doubt on count 2, did he follow his training? It's like, even in the training, they're telling you, well, you should go in, but we don't endorse, we don't encourage it. Because having greater numbers significantly improves a first responder's odds for success. Now, what does that mean, odds for success? Because what they keep saying is that there's a continuum of life scale, and there's a priority of life scale, right? And then proof success. This is not saying odds for success meaning odds that I stay alive as an officer. Odds for success in being able to protect civilians. Odds for success in being able to actually do this. Because if you try to just run in and you don't have any of that, that shooter, remember the shield comes in when they finally came in, pop, 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 he's putting it right on the shield. The guy in the back of the stick, he comes in, shot in the head. That guy was ready. And anybody who approached that door was dead at the door. They were dead at that door. So what they're saying is the numbers improve the first responders' odds for success in saving lives, because a dead police officer is protecting no one. And that's what his training says. That's the person they brought you to say what his training was. That's what the training says. So they're sending mixed messages to these officers, and then if you better read the mixed message the right way, or the way they want you to read it, otherwise you're in this chair. It's not right. We saw the training pictures. This is how they're training to respond to active shooter. You got 2 people, you got rifles, they're coming in together, they're coming in different ways. That's how they're training. But that's not how it was. And we said in those hundreds of pictures, they didn't bring you one picture where they're coming in with all they got is a gun. All they got is a handgun. Not one in the hundreds that they took at that training. Because they're training these officers to have the right equipment. Adrian didn't, because the school district didn't buy it. Bailouts, we talked about it. Why is it important? Because everybody is responding strangely to this thing because of this wreck. They all think, they're going, well, it's okay that Coronado and them thought, well, this guy's running through the school because it's a bailout, he's just trying to get away from us. But it's not okay that Adrian thought that that could happen. It's not okay if Adrian's standing here going, well, these guys are here and I'm here and I don't know where these shots are coming from, but he's probably trying to go here. I still have a whole school down here. It's not okay if Adrian thought bailout, no, he didn't follow his training. What Adrian said, he cooperated every time. Remember, this is a day later, and you know he's experiencing time compression. You know he's doing that because he's saying, I hear the shots, she's telling me I radio it out. That's not how it happened. So he's going through the same problems that we've talked about in all the other witnesses having to recount and recall what happened. He's having that same issue. He drove to the danger, and Nick will talk more about it. And then hindsight bias. And here's the thing that they keep trying to get him on. They go, because hindsight bias for Adrian is, when he's telling the story about what happened, he says, yes, it was a female, it was a coach. Because he now knows that that's the truth. At the time, though, he did not know that. At the time, he didn't think it was a woman. He thought it was the shooter at the time. But when he's telling the story, he's now telling it in a way, using the knowledge that he has, and he's explaining the story. And the same thing goes for when he's talking about what Melody Flores told him. When he's talking about what he understood, he did eventually understand what she was communicating and communicated it out. But in hindsight bias, he's not going through with the ranger, and the ranger's not asking, was she clear about it? Did you know beyond a reasonable doubt when you got out of the car that she said that he's over there and you knew exactly where it was? He didn't follow up with any of that. So what Adrian's doing at the time of interview is he's skipping all that stuff. And he's getting to, I figured out what she was trying to say, and I communicated it out on the radio. He skipped it all because nobody's asking him. Because when they interviewed him, they're not prosecuting him. They don't think he did anything wrong. Nobody does. Nobody does. Until years later, after all of this, they had somebody's got to go in that chair. So ultimately, it's the same thing I said from the beginning. You know, I told my kid, and so I'm here, I'm helping this man. But I can't be the only one, and Nico can't be the only one, and Gary can't be the only one. He needs your help too. Y'all are all citizens, and he needs you. He needs you to look at these facts as you have. And y'all have been very attentive, and y'all have had to see very horrible things, and hear horrible things. A lot of those things didn't have anything to do with those 3 minutes. Why did they bring it? You know why they brought it. You know why they tried to do it. The horror to make you so angry with him that you convict him. They played on your emotions. They presented all that in front of him. They're trying to do all of that, but they're not really going to what Adrian was experiencing and thinking and feeling on that day. But the one thing you do know, he went up that hallway. The one thing you do know, he went after somebody he thought was the gunman. That man didn't just stand by. He acted, except they just ignore all of his actions because they're trying to pretzel it, massage it, get it in there, do anything that they can to get the conviction. It's the most horrible thing, one of the most horrible things ever. One of the most horrible things that's ever happened in this state. But those kids are not served. The memory of those children, that I agree should be honored, is not honored by an injustice in their name. It's not. And so we're asking you to find him not guilty.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we had discussed prior to beginning the argument to take a break at some point, and everybody agreed this would be a good time to do it. So take 10 minutes and we will resume the arguments, but do it as quickly as you can. We'll be in recess for 10 minutes. Remember my instructions, do not discuss the case. Do not discuss.
Okay, so folks, I'm still struggling with my voice. But
It almost got worse, Tanya.
well, it's like the less I use it, the worse it gets. Okay, so Bree West is our legal expert for today. See, it's like the more I talk.
Yes.
Talk to me about what you think about what we've heard so far.
Okay. Wow. What was the DA saying? What it was disorganized. It was rambling. It almost felt stream of consciousness. But then you say to yourself, that was the opening to the closing argument for the state of Texas. Obviously, we sandwiched the defense in the middle, and then the prosecution gets to close the argument. But in the 45 minutes that the prosecutor was talking, he talked about the law, the facts, the defense case, their case. So what? What's left? I don't. But on top of everything, we really didn't hear anything.
Right.
So I'm.
He started with Abe Lincoln.
He started with Abe Lincoln. I think when we start with Abe Lincoln, we're all downhill, Tanya. We don't have a whole lot, so I'm worried about that. I think that, obviously, from my perspective, I think the defense has done an outstanding job throughout the trial. I really do. I think that all of them have done an outstanding job, and I don't think that the closing argument was, I think that was right in line with how well of a command of that courtroom they have. And it's impressive. Now we're on a break, so I anticipate that the second half of the defense argument is going to be on the back end of this break. I know that lots of people are asking where Nico LaHood is, so I anticipate that he will be the second half of the defense.
I'm sure he will be.
Yeah. So, but up until this point, without a doubt, the defense has commanded these closing arguments.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at these comments and people are like, and they're wishing me well.
Oh, yes.
I appreciate that, guys.
She really is. She's okay, guys.
I
She
feel
sounds
fine.
really bad, but she's okay.
I sound horrible. It's my allergies. It's terrible. And it's terrible timing to have this happen. Let's talk about the one thing you were like, when he played the portion from the prosecutor's opening, you were like,
boss. That
Yeah.
was gangster. So essentially what the defense did in preparing their closing argument is they took clips of the words of the prosecution that they made in their opening statement and prepared to use it against them in the defense's closing. That is gangster. I mean, that was phenomenal. I mean, how many gold stars can we give? I don't know. But we're joking about this, we're laughing about this, and it's not a joke. Obviously, this is very serious.
Look, it is with all. Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying.
Right.
What happened here? What happened in this school?
Right.
And I've said it, I don't know how many times.
Right.
What happened to these children? The law enforcement response was unexcusable.
Right.
It never should have happened.
Right.
It never should have taken 77 minutes. It's
Right.
all the things.
Right.
The question is, do you hold Adrian Gonzales accountable?
The question is, do you hold Adrian Gonzales alone
Right.
accountable for all of the things, for all of the bad police work, for all of the miscommunication and confusion, for all of the fear, do you hold just him
Right.
accountable?
I mean, they have charged, they have charged Peter Arredondo,
Yes.
the former chief, but it's a little different situation because he is in charge. When he arrives, he becomes the incident commander.
Correct.
What did you think of, when Jason Goss is saying, the defense attorney is saying, look, they want to you to give a pass to Saucedo and who could have taken the shot, and doesn't, and Coronado, who makes the choice to drive around. Look, they're operating on the information. Essentially he's saying, you want to give everybody else a pass,
Right.
because of the confusion and what they're facing. But Adrian Gonzales,
Right.
he has to act perfectly. What do you think of that argument?
I mean, I thought it was perfect. I mean, and when I say perfect, what I mean is it was exactly the argument that should have been made, right? Like, in other words, that's not how our law is designed. That's not how we're set up. So the truth of the matter is Adrian Gonzales did act. He did do things. Maybe we don't agree that he did everything perfectly. Maybe
Right.
we don't agree that he did everything as quickly. Maybe we don't agree that he, whatever the disagreements may be, but what we cannot say is that he didn't try. And that's really what we're dealing with here. Like, you're trying to criminalize the fact that you didn't think that he did enough or fast enough or whatever, but that's not what this statute is charging, right? It's saying you
Right.
failed to act. You did not do. And that's not, they can't even, the prosecution can't even present evidence that says he did nothing.
Right. You don't like what he did.
You didn't like what he did, but not that he did nothing.
Right.
And we can't, I think we're on a very slippery slope if we start to say we're going to criminalize, like, the amount, right? Like, I think that, I think we're on a dangerous path if we start doing that.
What did you think about when Goss starts with, that monster is dead?
Outstanding. I mean, and I think that, you and I talked about it, and I think that the defense team has done this throughout the trial to remind this jury that the person that killed these children, the person that affected this community in the way that has changed the trajectory of so many lives, that person is dead,
Right.
and that person is not on trial.
Right.
And so let us bring it back to, as hard as it is, as emotional as this experience has been for everyone, like, the 12 of you are sitting here because you said to us that you can separate those things. But we're going to remind you, we're going to remind you throughout the trial with every witness in opening and in closing, but you said that you can separate those things, and that's going to be their job.
What did you think when the prosecutor said, the 12 of you will get to set the bar for law enforcement?
Yeah, I think that the way that the defense came back with that and said, okay, so they're asking you to set the bar for law enforcement to be absolutely perfect in every given
Right.
situation, which is then going to ultimately result in law enforcement not acting because they're
Right.
going to be scared that they can't be perfect. I mean, I thought that was, could it have been any more brilliant?
Because they said, well, You can be like Randy Hill. You can be like Randy Hill and stay on the perimeter. Sorry.
You could, okay, just so you guys, she said you could be like Randy Hill and stay on the perimeter. But yeah, so I just think that, I think that in a weird way, to say to a jury in this community where it's already this devastating, to put that kind of weight on the shoulders of the jury to say you're going to set the precedent for law enforcement going forward forever, that's too much.
Right.
That's too much. And quite frankly, that's really not, that's not the precedent that we want.
Okay, so, but we never know what a jury's going to do, right? I mean, we've sat here. I've listened to the entire trial, and I have seen juries. I will say this: every time I think I know what a jury's going to do,
Right.
I am wrong.
Right.
Juries are But I've also always been impressed by how juries will really take their duty to heart. Mm-hmm. Somebody was saying in here they thought that we were in the not guilty camp. I'm not in any camp, but I have watched the entire trial, and I have covered law enforcement for a long time, and I think this is a really difficult case. It is a historic case.
Yes.
You have never had a police officer in the state of Texas be tried under this statute in this way.
Right. I mean, and I think that even the defense said, the statute is actually not meant to be used in this way, right? Like, that's not really what was contemplated as we're trying to twist and turn, and how much did you act versus how little you acted. I mean, that's not the intent behind it. And I agree. I mean, Tanya, what I think my position is I'm sort of evaluating the job that the prosecution is doing versus the job that the defense is doing, and what I think, how that's landing with the jury. So not in a camp, but I do think that, right now, the defense is outshining the prosecution in every way.
What do you think we're going to see next?
I think that you're going to sort of see the wrapping up. I think that
we'll see Nico, obviously.
Okay, so Nico is going to be next.
It's got to be.
Nico. Like, who else is it? It's got to be Nico. And I think that he's going to bring, how he is, right? Like that charisma, moving around the courtroom, taking command. He's like not a gigantic person, but he feels, when you're watching him and you're listening to him, he's like a gigantic person. And so I think it's going to be that. And wrapping it up, I think there were global arguments on the front end of the defense, and so now we're going to get granular and really specific. And then you might ask me, so what is the prosecution going to do in their close? Tanya, I have no idea. I mean, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know, because unfortunately what they said in their open to close was literally instantly and immediately used against them in the defense's opening to their close. So I don't know how you clean that up on the back end.
After Nico, do you think they take a lunch break, or do they power on?
I think that they're taking, a 10-minute break now.
Right.
I think that presumably they may have like an hour and a half more.
At least.
I don't know how you don't feed people. I mean, you know what I mean? I know that they have a 10-minute break. Maybe somebody got a snack, but I don't know how you don't give them a lunch break.
But you're asking a lot of jurors. You're asking a lot of jurors.
You're asking a lot of them. Oh, okay. And I think we're coming back, but you are asking a lot of them. I think that they may send them to the deliberation room and tell them, send us a note if you want to go to lunch. That's what that is what may happen. I gotta put my earpiece back in.
Yes. All right, members of the jury, when we recessed, the defense was in its closing argument. You may proceed.
May I please report, Judge? Closing counsel. I think what we're all struggling with is how could one person do such a horrific and evil act to those children? And it's real. I mean, we're all thinking it. We're not immune from it. Everyone's thinking that. And the issue is that generates emotion. This has been an emotional trial. I can only imagine what it is to the families, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. I know it's been emotional for you. We've been watching you, rightfully so. It's been emotional to you. It's been emotional to us as well. Do you not think that that burly man, when he goes home and he gave you that story about his son, that he's not digging his face in his chest, weeping? I have permission to say this because he did. Weeping. Do you not think that Gary, when he's doing FaceTime with his twins, that he stays on a little bit longer or lets them call past their bedtime so he can talk to them, never knowing if that's that last time? Do you not think that Michelle doesn't rush home to go to her granddaughter's games? Because she does. It's emotional for all of us. Or Joseph, and he gets away and disappears at the house that we're staying in because he wants to talk to his children, making sure they're okay. I shared with you in jury selection the journey my parents went on and my family went on with the murder of my brother in our driveway. Do you not think that when I close my eyes that I don't rethink picking up my mom off the ground in our driveway, loading my brother's body on the gurney after they finished the investigation and helping my pop wash off my brother's blood in our driveway? There's nothing like a mama's cry. Nothing like a mom's cry. You can't explain it. Nothing compares to it. And that's real. And we don't ignore that. It's never been us against the family. It's never been Adrian against the family. It's been a pursuit for truth. Remember the totality of the circumstances? It's a pursuit for truth. And because this has been so emotional, the only way that can be dealt with in a justice system is through a jury trial. I love a jury trial. I love the justice system. Thomas Jefferson, as we talked about in jury selection, we talked about Thomas Jefferson. This has a little bit of a delay. I consider trial by jury as the only anchor ever yet imagined by man, by which the government can be held to the principles of its Constitution. One of our founding fathers believed that. I do. In a system of the people, by the people, and for the people, you're the equalizer. You're the one that has the final say. With all due respect to the judge, who I respect very much, not him, not the bailiffs, not the government for sure, not even the defense, it's you. It's the people. And that's why I love a jury trial. And it deals with the emotion. It's the only way to balance this emotion and reason. And I say this respectfully as I can. They're trying to hijack your emotion to circumvent your reason. That's what they're trying to do. That they're your emotions, but they're being hijacked. And we know that. So how do you deal with that? Because in a world where we don't agree on anything, we definitely don't agree on politics. We don't agree on worldview and religion. We don't agree on definitions. Most people agree, no matter where you're at, most people agree that we don't want innocent people convicted and punished. Most people agree on that. And the only way we do that is through the justice system. And the representative of that is Lady Justice. She represents the justice system. Not Lady Liberty, it's Lady Justice. And this comes back from the Greek times, the Roman times, where there was a polytheistic society and there was Greek gods, and she was the god. I don't believe in Greek gods or goddesses, but she was the goddess of order. The justice system is supposed to bring order to a society. And everything means something on this symbol, right? The blindfold means something. She doesn't look at politics. She doesn't look on whether you're a Hindu or Buddhist or Islamic or atheist or agnostic or that I'm a Christian. She doesn't look at any of that stuff. What she does is she tries to get the facts and the law and merge them together to reach this elusive concept called justice. The sword. The sword represents strength. The justice system has to be strong. There's something called the death penalty and life imprisonment. That's in the justice system. So the justice system should have a sword aspect to it. And then her foot's on a book, because you have to have a command of the law, right? You have to know the law and have a command to dispense it properly. And her foot is on the book as she controls the law. And regardless of your religion or your worldview, the universal symbol of a serpent is evil. And the justice system should smash out evil in a society, true evil in a society. But yet she has those scales. And these scales are important. These scales say, I don't care about those cameras. These scales say, I don't care about the false narrative that's been out there. These scales say, I don't care about all the resources of the government. The scales even say, it doesn't even matter what the judge thinks. The scales says is we have to balance all that out, look at everything, and come find this concept called justice. And I love it. I love her. I loved her when I was a DA myself in Bexar County, as we talked about, when I made death penalty decisions, when Jason and I were prosecuting murders. I loved it. I love it as a defense attorney, sitting at that table, either defending people innocent like Adrian of an allegation by the government with all their resources. I love it. And in a world that has this dichotomy and this battle, the justice system brings us all together with a blindfold, not made of mesh, and not lifted up when it's convenient. It stays on the whole time. And so this is the point, though. This is the point in a trial, in a jury trial. This is the point in our justice system where Lady Justice takes the scales and she hands them to you. And now you have them. And that's what we're arguing to you. And that's what we've presented to you. And so all of this gets me to a point of where I'm in a dilemma. Let me tell you what my dilemma is. My dilemma is that I'm a passionate person, if you haven't noticed. And my passion, I think, can be a strength, but can also be a weakness. And so I wonder to myself, if I look like I haven't slept, it's because I haven't. Did I do too much? Was I too passionate? Was I too aggressive? Or did I not do enough? Did I not ask the right questions? Should I have gone even harder? And I struggle with that. But my dilemma is I can't apologize for it. And I won't be fake. And I won't tell you something that I don't believe. I haven't done that since jury selection. I won't start now. And so I can't apologize for it. And because I can't apologize for it, all I can do is ask you for grace. Just extend some grace to me. So if I've done anything, if Jason's done anything, if Gary's done anything to offend you, please, you don't have to now, you have to, please hold it against me or Jason or Gary, not against Adrian, okay? So that's what I'm asking you to do for us. And so we have to look at things, because what came up during the trial, and at the beginning when I told you, is there was a concept called totality of the circumstances, right? This case, ultimately, we're going to consider everything, allegedly. We want you to consider everything. But this case boils down, truly, to 1 minute and 48 seconds. Not 3.5 minutes, not 77 minutes, to 1 minute and 48 seconds. And it came up during the trial. And so Jason talked to, how do we know that? I'm not making that up. I'm going to their charging document. I'm going to their instrument that they charged Adrian. It goes up until after the shooter entered the room, 111 and 112. Until after the active shooter shot at one or more, one child or children in rooms 111. So until it's from when it's from showed up at this, it's from as the shooters, and until that shooter goes into those rooms and does what he did to those children. So we have times on that. That's what I'm saying. We have times. We know. Remember this? It's over here, but we took a picture of it. So Adrian parks. It's not contested. Adrian parks at 11:31:55. He parks. We'll talk about what he was responding to and how other people responded and how Adrian responded as he's going to what he thought was the danger. And we'll talk about shots fired. That's true. He calls shots fired because he hears them himself. But he parks at 11:31:55. He's not at 11:31:55 knows what's going on. At 11:31:55, he doesn't have a full concept of what's happening. He just parks at 11:31:55. And the shooter enters the building at 11:32:58. That's 1 minute and 3 seconds. And then some time goes by, 22 seconds later, he's shooting at those doors, and then 20 seconds later, he's in. If you add it all up, it's 1 minute and 48 seconds. That's what their indictment says. It's not 3.5 minutes. It's 1 minute and 48 seconds. Parked, entered the building. That's it. And then there's 22 seconds later, and then he enters again. 11:33:43. This is when he enters room 111. This is where we get the extra 45 seconds. And that's why I say 1 minute and 48 seconds. I'm going by facts that you've heard. They're charging in. No one's making things up on our side. Okay? I don't know what happened there. Give me 1 second. It held down on purpose.
Yeah, just back it.
I'm trying. Give me 1 second, guys. Okay. Okay, so here's what the government wants you to compare Adrian's actions to others. So let's do that. And that's all we were doing during the trial. We were asking questions. We got permission. I mean, Mr. Espinosa sat to your right, and then Mr. Starbeck over your right shoulder, sir. And we asked everybody permission. For where you were sitting, Mr. Peña was between you two. And we remember in jury selection, we talked about that. And we got permission from you to be able to ask tough questions. Even about sensitive matters. We did. And everyone said yes. So let's compare some actions. We're going to compare the actions of Mendoza, Saucedo, Coronado, and eventually Hill. And yes, they could figure that out during trial, so of course we're going to talk about it. So just to lay them down, you guys know this already. So here's an aerial view. We can't even see Adrian's car. It's so much to the southeast side. But Coronado, Mendoza, Saucedo are on this side, a little bit outside of it. You've seen this picture multiple times. This is the scene. Here's a better view. We can see Adrian's car way over here. He's driving into the eye of the storm. Many witnesses said that. He drove all the way to the back. And then we had those 3 officers still at the corner. Here's the west door, and here's where the shooter was shooting. We have evidence of that, and then he enters this door at 11:32:48. So let's compare. Adrian and Officer Mendoza. Adrian drove into danger. Officer Mendoza stayed away at the perimeter. Adrian had no line of sight, not contested. Christina's not going to come up here and tell you that he had line of sight. Mendoza was the same side. He was on the same side as the shooter. Adrian was alone. Mendoza had backup. Adrian was one of the first 5 in the building. Remember, we're going to talk about that first 5. Because Joe Vasquez and others talked about that first 5 and what they did and what they potentially prevented. Mendoza enters the east door at 11. The east door, even though he's on the west side, the east door at 11:42:48. But before that, he drives away, not towards the gunfire. When he's facing the door, when he's looking, when he has backup, and someone has an AR-15, we're going to talk about Saucedo next. He drives away, not towards the gunfire. Remember that pretzel that Jason's talking about? There's one of them. Let's do some more comparisons, because they're going to compare Adrian to everybody else. Adrian and Officer Saucedo. Adrian drove into danger. Officer Saucedo stayed away at the perimeter. Adrian, no line of sight. Saucedo saw the shooter, and we're going to look at the video in a second, and asked to shoot. Adrian, alone. Saucedo, God bless you, has backup. Adrian has a handgun only. Saucedo has an AR-15 rifle. Adrian, one of the first 5 in the building. Saucedo never goes in the building. After having line of sight, opportunity, and ability to do something, and he doesn't. He never goes in the building. And he also drives away, not towards the gunfire. But let's look at this. This is the dashboard of Coronado. Here's the sergeant. Mendoza's here. They set up perimeter. They're acting as if they're being shot at, but there's no evidence. There's no defects. There's no objective evidence they got shot at. Here's Saucedo. There's a long rifle. Watch his behavior. Watch him aim. And watch him do this point. He's there. He's there. There he is. He had aimed him. He saw. He's pointing at him. He's there. And then they saw him walk into the building, so they leave. We're coming back to this video.
There's no evidence that's a misstatement of the facts, Your Honor.
No, it's not,
I'm
Judge.
going to object. I want it on the record that he's misstating facts to the jury.
Okay, once again, ladies and gentlemen, what they say in argument's not evidence. If it differs from your own recollection or rely on your own, you may proceed.
It's in evidence, guys. I asked questions. I was very specific about questions. I gave people opportunities to talk. I wasn't trying to be a bulldog on anybody. Maybe you can think I was on Ranger Hill. We'll talk about that in a second. But we're just asking. We were just asking questions, specific questions, not general ones. Okay. So let's talk about Officer Coronado, Sergeant Coronado. Adrian drove into danger. Sarge stayed away at the perimeter. Adrian, no line of sight. Sarge, same side as the shooter. Adrian, alone. Coronado has backup. Adrian, frantic witness he was dealing with. Coronado, frantic witness he was dealing with Claudia. Remember that? We're gonna look at the video again, and you'll see it. Adrian, unfortunately, and again, we're not ragging on her, okay? You saw me cross her. But she was wrong, and we'll talk about so many things that she was inaccurate about. A frantic witness that was wrong and inaccurate because she was on the wrong side of this issue. But the frantic witness, Claudia, the sergeant on the same side was accurate. Because you know why? Because she said, he went in the building. He went in the building. And you see the video yourself that they're acting like they knew he went in the building. Because you don't go from this, thinking you're being shot at, to this unless you know that the danger's gone and they're in the building. You saw the video yourself, and we're going to watch it again. Sergeant Coronado unfortunately drives away, not towards the gunfire. So now we're going to watch it again, but now we're going to focus on Sergeant Coronado, okay? This is him again. We already looked at Saucedo's behavior. Look who he's talking to. He's yelling at somebody, and that's Claudia. You go inside, okay. What? They're talking. She testified. I told them he went in the building. And guess what? He acts like he knew he went in the building. Because you don't go from ducking like that to watch his car drive off. Watch all of them. They all know he went in the building. They don't believe what they're trying to prosecute. There's no way. Our defense is not, well, if you're going to prosecute Adrian, prosecute other people. They don't believe it themselves. You can't. I'm going to go through a list in a little while of all the things that they're going to have to, Christina, with all due respect, is going to have to come up here and tell you to ignore to get to the man at the bottom of the totem pole. I'm going to show you that list, and I'll be right, humbly, but I'll be right. Where's Randy Hill? I know it bothers them, because he's the one dispatched. Why didn't they call him? Why didn't they call Saucedo? So we can ask them questions and bring you answers. The government has all the resources, all the rangers, this whole road. They have the whole government of Texas and all the resources to bring you evidence. And we expect that of them. Where's Randy Hill? Where's Mendoza? Where's Saucedo? None of them. The only reason why they brought Coronado is because they wanted that video in. He's dispatched at 11:29:36, 3 minutes before the shooter enters into the building. What was 911 told? That is another aspect of it, Bill. And Bill's right. I mean, he could hear. He's an intelligent man, and tremendous respect for him. But he heard our questions. I mean, that's a factor. We have to. If we're looking at the totality, what were they told? What information did they all have? Someone shooting a gun. This is what Mr. Limon is told, dispatch. They just shot at us. He's shooting at the school. That wasn't relayed to anybody. He's jumping into the schoolyard. Wasn't relayed to anybody. He just jumped over the fence. Still wasn't relayed to anybody. He's running towards the school. Nobody knew that, but that nobody knew that includes Adrian. That includes Adrian. He's wearing black. No one knew that. That would have been helpful to know. But we know for sure, and I know Ranger Hill's here. He can come sit right here if he wants to. I asked him, you don't know, I know when he showed up on the scene. You do? It wasn't in your critical timeline. Well, it's in a different timeline that he gave to them, didn't give to us. Interesting. But so in his critical timeline that he didn't review for 3 years before he sat in front of you and testified to this, he said that that's all that's in his critical timeline. Not when Randy Hill supposedly showed up, because Randy Hill didn't check in at location. Let me know what's going on. Nothing. No communication. So all we have in the first critical timeline is this. Randy Hill at 11:33:32. Just standing there. Setting up. Did you hear how difficult it was for him to try to make up an excuse for what Randy Hill's behavior was? Did you hear how difficult it was? Because you couldn't objectively do it. Not based off Nico standards or Jason standards, just training standards, tactics. I asked them tactical questions. How does this make sense? Well, he was just there momentarily. Where's that? I don't understand where you're getting this from. What we know for sure is that Sergeant Coronado is driving around the school, and there's Randy Hill. He's already out of his car. He's been there for a little while. I don't know how much it is. The ranger thought he knew. I don't know how. But there he is, setting up perimeter. When nobody's asked him to set up perimeter. Oh, they said there's a dispatch, again, that we didn't get from an unknown person. Remember that exchange? Figure it out.
Again, object. This is misleading the jury, and he's having them believe that we did not turn over everything to him, and it's
Okay.
objection.
Remember that exchange? I was just asking questions based off the evidence that we were looking at. I let him, what are you looking at, so I can ask you about what you have in front of you. There was no trick question, no gotcha. I told him I'm not going to question your character, but I will question your opinions. I'm going to question your investigation. He knew that. He knew that. He's coming before you after 3 years of all of this and the resources, 3 years, and that's what they brought you? That's the mortar to their case, Ranger Hill? Bringing it all together in his critical timeline? Well, where's Randy Hill? We all want to hear from Randy Hill. And then we have a hero, a true hero, Joe Vasquez. You heard about Joe. I mean, he gave me permission to call him Joe. He called me whatever he wants to, but we went through scenarios. We went through breaching. We talked about when you breach an outward swinging door versus inward swinging door. Well, what did Joe tell us? At 11:56:28, he linked up with Lieutenant Gonzales, who briefed him. Very different when you're being briefed by fellow cops after the situation has already been assessed. Very different, but they want to conflate that to Adrian. Well, they did that. They listened to instructions. They moved in. You have 27 officers around you. Everybody has guns and helmets and vests on and AR-15s and said, here's what's going on. And oh, yeah, of course they're going to listen. That wasn't Adrian. I asked if he wanted me to make entry. He didn't do. He asked. He understands there's an order. He understands the danger of it. We talked about the danger of it and fatal funnels, and there was 2 of them. There was the hallway, and then there was the actual doorway. We talked about that. Response, no, we're trying to negotiate because we've been fired at. That's what he was told. Waited with Canales for negotiating team and the TAC team. So a true hero. I hope you like Joe, because I like Joe. I mean, he waited. There was still sporadic shooting at times. We look at the timelines, the critical timeline that's kind of complete. But he waited with Canales for the negotiation and the TAC team. Should Joe be sitting in that chair? Is Joe a coward? Are board TAC a coward? Are all the other officers cowards? Eventually, board TAC showed up. It was a bit of a blur. He doesn't remember. A lot was going on. Then they had a planning. They planned the entry. How long did you wait there? I asked them that. They entered at 12:50:01, almost an hour after he arrived. So Joe Vasquez is a real hero. He thought his daughter was in there. Could have been in there because she went to school there. But he still waited an hour because he knows there's a pecking order. He knows there's a way. He understands fatal funnels. He said you're going to die at the door. That's what he said. We got that from Joe, not from us. And he waited because they were planning entry. Part of their training too. Waited 50 minutes, over 50 minutes. But board TAC was rehearsing and opening the door. And again, I'm not saying that's good or bad. That's what part of their training, because an open, outward swinging doors is difficult and it's dangerous. But they had the equipment at that time. Adrian didn't. The first 5 didn't. Taking cover is reasonable. Then we asked them about Adrian's behavior, because they didn't bring an expert, so we had to ask somebody, and we're going to ask somebody who's in law enforcement. Well, taking cover is reasonable if you don't know where the shots are coming from. From Joe, their witness. Containment. Remember I asked about containment? We talked about that. And he said, if those first 5 officers, we call them the first 5, if the first 5 hadn't contained the shooter, he could have done the same thing to the whole school. Think about that. When he didn't contain, he didn't do anything to distract or detain or to impede. That first 5 group held them in 111 and 112. And let me submit to you humbly. If it wasn't for that first 5, that person responsible, because I know I've called him an animal and I know I've called him a monster, because he is. You know, you get the point. But if it wasn't for that first 5, what would have stopped him from finishing off those precious babies in 112? Was it a distraction? He knew there was talking, there's negotiating, he waiting for them. He wants to be a cop killer too. I mean, he wants to be a cop killer, so he's distracted. He's done damage he's done what he's done in 111. He did what he did in 112. But what would have stopped him to finish everybody off? The 5 outside, knowing that they could breach at any time. He doesn't know what they're doing. And he was waiting in that closet. He knows that closet, remember? 111 was his home room. He was going to 111. He went to school there. 111 was his home room. He knew that room. But even Joe Vasquez said, if those first 5 hadn't contained the shooter, and by the way, and I know it bothers them, Adrian's part of that first 5. And not that 3.5 minutes that Christina's going to come up and argue, that minute and 48 seconds with no line of sight. Talking to the guy on the stick. He was talking to the guy on the stick. Remember that stick is the stack when they're breaching behind the shield? He said he couldn't hear me because I realized I was wearing a gas mask. He himself was experiencing perception distortion. He didn't even realize he had a gas mask on. There was no gas, but he put it on, and he couldn't hear, and he's talking, he's like, oh, what am I doing with this gas mask on? And so he took it off to talk, but he didn't realize it at the time. But everybody, it's okay for everybody else except for Adrian, because he's the man on the bottom on the totem pole. He's easy pickings. Except for you guys, to settle that. Now let's talk about Mel Flores. Look, I mean, if you couldn't tell that I had an affinity for her because she's a special ed teacher, then you weren't paying attention. I have a special needs son, and I told her that, and I appreciate that. And it takes a special person to spend 25 years teaching and taking care of and nurturing and stewarding special needs children. No one is attacking her character. But she came in almost 7 days after the event. She admitted she's watching these cameras and reading the stories and listening to talk, and that's human, that's normal. She wasn't given an order by the judge or anybody else not to talk to anybody, but that was influencing her talk. And so, but she's witness one. She's in their indictment. The training and then witness one, based off what she said. She thought the shooter had a handgun. She was sure of it, but he didn't have a handgun. Did not see the windows break on the east side of the building. I could not see from where I was, but Bill, in opening statements, expected you to say that she did. Why? Because that puts Adrian in a disadvantaged position. But then the truth came out during cross-examination, right? Remember we talked about that in jury selection? The greatest vehicle ever invented to find the truth, I was taught, is cross-examination. It's in Proverbs as well. Because we had to, and we asked you, and I told you that direct examination for the government was going to be like a waltz, and then cross-examination was going to be like a dental visit, pulling teeth, and I think you saw that. It wasn't our intent. We can't control the way the witnesses respond, but some of them were very honest. State Exhibit 921 identifies the wrong PD vehicle. She identified the wrong PD vehicle. She identified Sergeant Page's vehicle. She ID'd Donald Page. Khaki pants, Adrian didn't have khaki pants on. Full beard, Adrian didn't have a full beard. You saw the interview. Short sleeves, white short sleeve shirt. Adrian wasn't wearing white short sleeve shirt. We believe she saw Sergeant Page, but she also testified that she was frantic. Yes, I was. Let me submit to you respectfully. Again, this is nothing against Ms. Flores. God bless her. Let me submit to you that you heard the 911 call from Mr. Limones. You heard Amy Marin's 911 call. Understandably, it's frantic in the background. You heard Claudia in the background of Mr. Limones' 911 call. Ms. Flores was more like that. Adrian's dealing with that type of franticness. Understandably, again, it's not a criticism, it's just an observation. He was pacing. Remember we talked about that? Assessing because you're shouting, yes, there's shouting, south entrance, west entrance, shots fired, and we'll talk about when he transmits something in a second at 11:32:59. She was with Adrian from 2 to 7 minutes. You can't cherry pick what you want to believe from her, Christina. You just can't do that. And you shouldn't do that. It's not right. It's not fair. I mean, so we know it couldn't have been 7 minutes because the timelines don't work out. The stuff that we do know, it couldn't have been 7 minutes. But even if it's 2 minutes, it covers the 1 minute 48 seconds that Adrian had no eyesight on the shooter. He had no opportunity. He didn't have the ability. He's with her. She's a victim / witness at the time, yelling, frantic, giving instructions. He's taking shots. He's looking around. He's taking cover. See, it's okay for everyone else to take cover but Adrian. For a minute, he can't take cover for a minute to observe, orient, decide, and then act. Remember their training? But she's going to have to come up here and tell you it's okay for Coronado, for Saucedo, and for Mendoza to take cover and then run from the shooting, run from the gunfire. Make a note, run from the gunfire, not run to the gunfire.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the sidebar comment.
Sustained.
So she's going to have to argue that to you. And I don't know how you do it in good conscience. I just don't know how you do that. But 2 to 7 minutes, it's a big deal. That's a big deal because it came out in evidence, and you should consider that. And the reason why it's in a big deal, I want to say this because I asked Ranger Hill. I said, well, why isn't that in your timeline? Why do you know that information? I go, would that have been important? And he said, yes, it would have been important. So good for you for answering that way because it's true. It would have been important for him to assess critical, important, his definition, important timeline. 2 to 7 minutes with a witness / potential victim. It matters in your assessment of someone's behavior and what they didn't do and what they were actually doing. Excuse me. Shots being fired, while with Adrian Gonzales? Yes, while they're together. So now he has somebody he has to protect as well. And himself and her, and think about it. He has no idea that this person's going, he doesn't know that. There's no evidence that he knew he was going in the building. He's going in the building, Adrian. There's no evidence of that. He couldn't even see this guy. And we said pacing could be taking cover. She says, I'm sure. Said the shooter went in the south door but pointed to the west side. Yes, I did. And then in her interview, the investigator, the ranger, had to say he did not go in the south side. Oh, I really thought he did. And she was honest about it. I really thought she was mistaken. She just was inaccurate. At the time, you thought the shooter went in the south door, yes. Told him the 4th grade building. He said, what building? He doesn't even know that. He's not part of that. He's assigned to the high school. He didn't even know which building you're talking about. Yes, I just wasn't listening, she said, because there was a lot going on for her. That's understandable. Then it said he's on the west side of the building. Yes. So south side entrance, west side building, yes. Dialogue between you two was 2 to 7 minutes, yes. So here we go. Adrian with her 2 to 7 minutes. Shots being fired while with Adrian, yes. You say pacing could have been taking cover, yes. Said shooter went in the south, yes. At the time you thought the shooter went in the south door, I did, yes. Told him 4th grade building, he said what building, yes. So there's confusion there. Not confusion like he's confused. He's trying to figure things out. He doesn't even know she doesn't even know where she's directing him to. And again, there's a lot going on for her. Dialogue, yes. I just wasn't listening. Now we have Ranger Nick Hill. And I'm sorry, Christine, I didn't mean to be disrespectful to you. I apologize. I'm going to temper myself. I really believe, with all due respect, Ranger, I really do believe that Thomas Jefferson was talking about someone like Ranger Hill. And I'm saying that with him in the room. I consider trial by jury, you, as the only anchor ever yet imagined by man, by which the government, including him, the government, can be held to the principles of its constitution, and one of those principles is due process. You know what due process means? It means fundamental fair play. Fundamental fair play. Everybody gets it. Remember that blindfold? We don't do this. Doesn't apply to you, can apply to you, doesn't apply to you, sir, applies to you, ma'am. It doesn't work that way. That's not how Lady Justice operates. That's why she's so beautiful. She wears that blindfold at all time. I'm not going to go over all of Ranger Hill's testimony and our back and forth. And again, if I offended you by my question of him, please hold it against me. I can only ask you to do that and extend some grace to me. But like Jason said, this was his presentation to you, in good conscience. This was, and if you not known any better, if we didn't ask questions, if we didn't push back, you would think that the shooter was right there, and then he just drove right by him. That's it. And then he placed the shooter where the shells were, and then we went through the whole ejection thing. Remember that? And it was at versus towards, and can you look at two people, and how many fingers am I holding up? And we went through a whole bunch of stuff, and I just asking pretty simple questions. But that's how he presented it to you, and that's not the facts. Jason told you. We know that because we have some video, grainy, yes, but we have video. But more importantly, we have Claudia, who he interviewed. He didn't review someone else's interview. He interviewed her. And not only does she, but also Mr. Limones and even Amy Marin loses the shooter in between cars. He's in between cars. That's where he should have been if he was going to present that to you, this animation. But the government sponsored him anyway. Now, whether they knew or didn't realize it, I don't know. I'm not inside their minds, and that's between them. But they sponsored him anyway. So what is Christina going to come here and say to you? 3 minutes. She'll say 3.5 maybe. Okay, because Bill kind of gave you the heads up on that. Didn't follow training. Well, Jason went over the training, so I asked him a lot of questions. I talked about tactics with him. He was a very, very nice man. He agreed. Just my opinion. I'm one opinion of many. There's different. These are suggestions. And I said, I understand. Thank you, sir. Very respectful. Didn't follow training. Then we showed you the training. We don't recommend going in alone. But we're not even saying Adrian made that conscious decision, by the way. We're talking about 1 minute 48 seconds. Had an opportunity, best opportunity. I mean, Ranger Hill, over the three in the corner, said that Adrian had a better opportunity to stop that shooter than Coronado, Saucedo, and Mendoza. You're the judge of the credibility. That's why you're here. That's why I love the jury section, the jury trial. And here's what they're going to do. They didn't say it, but they're saying it. They're trying to feed you a coward sandwich. They want you to eat a big coward sandwich and say that Adrian's the one that gave it to you. The problem is it is wrapped around 2 slices of bread of bravery. That's the problem. You have this coward sandwich, but you have bravery and bravery around it. The bravery of driving into trouble, thinking there was a shooter. Only one, didn't set up perimeter, goes into the trouble, into the eye of the storm. And then he's one of the first 5 that goes in the building. Takes rounds, what Martinez does, takes rounds, and you saw the video. Adrian has his weapon out, he doesn't move. Paige is there, he's in the fatal funnel. All that shooter needed to do was turn this way and start shooting at them. He didn't run away. He only went outside when his radio didn't break, because the radios don't work inside of schools, which is interesting. And so then he had to go outside to call for SWAT, call for cover. Everybody's doing that. It's for the cover for the situation, not for him. That wasn't accurate. And then what Bill told you in opening is that Adrian, if you listen to Bill's opening, and again, this is respectfully, you would think that Adrian showed up and just stayed there and stood there. If you remember opening, I don't know if you do or don't, but that he just stood there and didn't do anything. And the evidence didn't play that out. The only thing Adrian remained in, he remained in danger. He went into the danger and remained. And once he figured things out, he went further into danger and remained. That's the only thing he remained in. And they're going to ask you to send the message. Jason couldn't help himself. He had to talk about it, and I understand. The problem is the message that will be sent is be Officer Hill. Set up perimeter, even though you're not asked to set up perimeter. Don't go in. Don't go into the eye of the storm. Don't even wait 30 minutes. Stand back. Don't do anything, because I don't want to be sitting in that chair. That's the message that will be sent. Not just to Uvalde County, but also to Nueces County, Bexar County, because people are watching. And that's the message that would be sent. That's not the message that needs to be sent. They need training. They need good training. They need proper training. They need resources. They need help from those schools to work with them in conjunction. And we'll talk about doors being locked here in a second. And all working synergistically together to protect the most precious thing we have in our community, and that's our children. No doubt about that. But to pick the man lowest on the totem pole and drag him into court and to come before you, there's a lot of things they're going to have to ask you to ignore. They're going to have to ask you to ignore inaccurate dispatch. They have to. I'm not saying it's their fault, but they're going to have to ask you to ignore it. They're going to have to ask you to ignore that Adrian drove into danger. Remember that sandwich? They're going to say, yeah, okay, the bread is fine, but the coward sandwich is full in the middle. And then, yeah, I understand the bread at the end is bravery, but we just want you to focus on what's in the middle. It's like an Oreo where you take off the up top. They want you to have the coward cream in the middle. Remained in danger. They're going to have to ask you to ignore that he remained in danger. That he had no line of sight. They're going to have to ask you to ignore that. He never had a line of sight. But other officers did, not him. They're going to have to ask you to ignore that it was truly, because I looked at the indictment and we're looking at the facts, it's truly 1 minute and 48 seconds. They're going to have to ask you to ignore that. She's going to argue something different, and give her your attention, please. They're going to have to ask you to ignore that. They're going to have to ask you to ignore Mendoza, who showed up 27, 28 seconds after Adrian. That's it. That's the difference. He was there too, before the shooter made it in, with line of sight, with backup, with guns, with superior weapons. They're going to have to ask you to ignore Salcedo. Line of sight, never goes in, drives away. You saw the video yourself on the dash cam. They're going to have to ask you to ignore Sergeant Coronado. They're going to have to ask you to ignore Randy Hill. They're going to have to ask you to ignore building doors being unlocked. Everybody, Wixel, all of them, all the Rangers said if those doors were locked, it would have made a difference. Since time is of the essence, those doors being locked would have made a difference, because you had 3 officers on that side. You had 3 officers on the side, on the west side, one with an AR-15, getting instruction from Claudia. He's going in the building. They're right there. And if you would have been locked out, you don't think that would have made a difference? But they have to ask you to ignore that. I don't know what you do with the school board on that. That's not what this trial is about. But you have to ignore that. They're going to have to ask you to ignore that. But it's not that important. It's more about Adrian. The classroom door is being unlocked. I'm sorry for what Mr. Reyes went through, but that door was unlocked, and it should have been locked. That would have made a difference, a key difference. And you know what really made a difference? If that door was unlocked and those 3 officers in the corner followed the gunfire and made it in the west door, not drive around for whatever reason. You can talk about. I want to hear the excuse. Made it, and then the shooter's in the fatal funnel. This door's locked. Even if he got into the school, the classroom door's locked, and he starts shooting at the door. But then here's these 3 officers following their training, cutting the pie, getting with him, and then he's in the fatal funnel, that would have changed things. We can what if it all day long, but they're what ifing it, and they're asking you to make presumptions and speculate with Adrian, but they don't want to do it with anybody else. This is the hardest part of my job. Because I have to sit down and I can't talk anymore. It's not that I like talking, I just have a lot to say. I get it. You can ignore me, you can say I'm full of it, that's fine. You can tell me after. But because the state has, the government has this burden that Jason went over, the highest burden in our justice system, the burden that the government has to prove to take away someone's liberty and change the course of their family's lives and that person's lives. And it's a burden that we all agreed was appropriate for the government with all their resources to have. They get to go first, and they get to go last. They gave us that sandwich. They gave us the burden of proof sandwich, okay? It's the other way around. And so I have to sit down and I can't talk. And please give Christina your attention. And she's gonna make arguments to you. And you're gonna see me in the corner, and I'm not gonna be looking at her, but it's not to be disrespectful. I wanna give her a heads up. It's because I get frustrated because I wanna talk, and I got an answer, and I got a question, and I have an argument. That's just my personality, for good or bad. That's just the way God wired me, okay? But I'm gonna be looking down and be writing notes, and my leg's gonna be going 100 miles an hour, I already know. But you can ask yourself, not just what would Nico, Jason, or Gary say, but what did the evidence show, right? And I promise you, I'm gonna do my best not to object during her closing. I will try. She can do it. I'm not offended by it. I'll do my best not to object, but listen to her, okay? And we're gonna ask you now, I'm asking you to apply this burden. The burden that's the highest in our justice system. The burden that says not sure is not guilty. The burden that says, no, you can't take the person from the bottom of the totem pole and move them up and ignore all these things. You can't ask me to ignore all those things. Government, you can't. You can't ask me to ignore all those things and apply this high burden. The judge told you in the charge that if you have a doubt and it's reasonable, one doubt, and it's reasonable, it's a not guilty. Just one doubt. Did they eliminate every doubt from your mind? I hope that's not the standard. If it did, then I'll deal with it. It'll be horrible, but I'll deal with it. But that would shock me. Because that can't be the standard. That can't be the standard. That can't be the message. Because she's going to come up and say, send a message. Well, but send a message also to the government. Send a message that, like Bill said in his closing, so we concentrated our case on the facts around Adrian Gonzales. Send a message you can't do that. You can't pick and choose. You've been given authority to steward well. People in our community say, steward this well, government. It's a huge responsibility. This is not how you steward it well. And if you apply the burden by law, if you buy the facts objectively, if you can acknowledge two things at one time, if you can acknowledge that families have been destroyed, because she's going to make an emotional plea to you. Everyone's cried, and you'll probably cry again. It doesn't take away something that my family's gone through or what they've gone through. If you apply them objectively and do what our founding fathers expected juries to do, we're asking you now, and we're hoping that you'll pick a 4-man or 4-person, 4-woman, and do a quick verdict, and a quick verdict of not guilty. Because the evidence has shown he's not guilty, folks. Thank you, and God bless you.
State.
Thank you, Judge.